This 11 Alive News special is sponsored by the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, inviting you to join the campaign for equal dignity at equaldignity.org.
The new year arrived in traditional fanfare.
With the first confirmed case of the coronavirus in America.
But 2020 would be no ordinary year as a pandemic loomed.
The risk to the American people remains very low.
The president was wrong. The pandemic's impact would prove catastrophic.
It is a failing, let's admit it.
And those who are getting the most sick are the ones crying out for social justice.
Pre-COVID, we were dealing with health inequities due to structural racism.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want? Just weeks into the pandemic, the tragic deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Rayshard Brooks ignite a movement on the streets across America.
There seems to be two justice systems in America, one for Black America and one for white America.
The nation is forced to deal with its racist scars from both the past and present. 2020 would be a year of reckoning. Up next, Equality Matters, the path forward. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Aisha Howard. So who knew at the beginning of the year, the country was about to go through two huge transformations, the coronavirus pandemic and the death of George Floyd. Both have the undertones of race and inequality, undertones that reached a boiling point. We start tonight with the results of an 11 Alive News exclusive poll. We asked Georgians statewide, compared to 4 years ago, are race relations in America better, worse, or about the same? Only 17% said better, 30% about the same, 48% worse. We also asked, do you support or oppose the Black Lives Matter movement? 53% said they support, 36% oppose, 11% not sure. It's been a few months since the Black Lives Matter movement ignited the crusade, but now what? Hope Forward takes a look at where organizers are focusing their attention now.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
We are at least getting the attention of people that we normally would not have gotten the attention of.
The entire crowd out here to kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That's the amount of time the knee was on the neck of George Floyd.
It's been an uphill battle, and it's been a long fight. People were talking about things that were not talked about before.
This is an American culture issue that has to be addressed right now. All of the Black bodies and Black lives that have been taken have really tipped the scales of the consciousness, not only of Black people, but of many Americans.
Since protests began in Atlanta, Georgia's first hate crime bill passed. Atlanta's chief of police resigned. 8 officers were criminally charged in different cases, and voters elected a new sheriff and district attorney in Fulton County. The streets are quieter as activists continue working on removing pieces from the jigsaw of racism.
It's a much broader conversation that's growing out of what used to be just the issue of police brutality.
No justice! No peace.
For some, it's virtual protests, voter registration, and elections.
We really encourage people to identify who their local state reps are. Who is their local DA? What judges are you voting for? Because these people are going to be the ones that are directly impacting so many of these cases.
People keep asking me if they think like the protesters are going to show up to vote in November. I think they absolutely are. I think that we've demonstrated that with the historic turnout in Georgia's June 9th primaries.
Others say they're focusing on disproportionate education and intervening in the lives of Black and brown teens.
We try to focus on the juvenile justice system because almost 80% of people in correctional facilities with juveniles in the juvenile system first. So if we can help meet people in the juvenile system, give them those different skills, tools, and supports that they need so that they can come out of the criminal justice system at that stage, then they won't be adult offenders. They'll never become convicted felons. They'll never be removed from their families. They'll never be taken out of their community.
And in the criminal justice system, some are working to raise awareness on issues inside Georgia prisons.
Me being a former correction officer and now a former inmate, I've had the opportunity to see exactly how they treat people in general. Based on my seeing it, it is another knee on the neck, but it's being done behind closed doors.
But many activists say police reform continues to be a high priority, intensified by the recent shooting death of 60-year-old Julian Lewis by a state trooper. The trooper was arrested.
The arrest happened in 7 days. But on the other hand, Julian Lewis is dead. We have to create a condition, an environment, an ecosystem where the taking of the life is not even a consideration.
The what now means to stay in the game.
It's a call to action. It's a call for you to become personally accountable.
Every day we share ways that we can continue fighting. So the pressure is still going to continue on. We just have to move more strategically.
There is no stopping point when it comes to equality.
Why waste a breath compromising or negotiating against ourselves? What do we have to lose?
I'm Reveal investigator Andy Perotti. When protesters marched the streets demanding reform after an unjustified police shooting, some pivot the conversation to black on black crime. But does the phrase unfairly perpetuate racism?
Put your hands up! Put your hands up!
When a black man dies at the hands of law enforcement, outrage on the street often follows, but so does another narrative.
93% of blacks in America are killed by other blacks.
Why is there not the outrage when there's black on black violence?
Black on black crime, a catchphrase some believe conservatives use to distract from police brutality.
And it makes it so bad, it's black on black crime.
A phrase also recently used by Dougherty County Coroner Michael Fowler after a rise in homicides near Albany this past May.
Nobody's saying anything. Like it's just something they're pushing up under the rug.
Not so, says Clifton Crowley. He says black communities are talking about it. The media just isn't paying attention. Crowley is the community chair for the Atlanta NAACP.
There's always been a deep level of concern for violence and poverty and crime within our community.
The licensed social worker points to a long list of local and national organizations focused on reducing violence in black communities, including Street Groomers, 100 Black Men of Atlanta, and former President Barack Obama's My Brother's Keepers initiative.
You have to look beyond the race.
Rodney Bryant is Atlanta's interim police chief. He doesn't dispute violence in black communities is a problem. In Atlanta, 81% of victims to violent crimes were black in 2018. Nearly 90% of people arrested for those crimes were black too. But Bryant argues violence is often a side effect of generational racism, which has created a health, wealth, and education gap.
I think it does do the black community a disservice when you say it's a black on black crime, because now you're saying it's just a black problem.
According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the majority of violent crime happens within the same race. A 2018 national survey found offenders were within the same race as the victim 70% of the time for blacks, 62% for whites. Here again is the Dougherty County Coroner speaking with 11 Alive's Faith Abube.
Have you ever used the term white on white crime or Hispanic on Hispanic crime?
No, if I see it, I see it. I just call a spade a spade.
For black people who use that term, I want you to think about the systematic racism that has occurred in this country and the effects of taking out 3 million black faces, incarcerating them, and releasing them back into the community.
Up next, a Metro Atlanta County forced to acknowledge its racist past. It's now one of the nation's wealthiest and fastest growing counties. It's also one of the least diverse. Chief Reveal investigator Brendan Keefe examines the painful past of Forsyth County.
It is hidden in a narrow patch of forest between rows of $500,000 homes. Even looking straight down, nothing betrays the mystery of what lies beneath. These tombstones are all that's left of the old Black Baptist Church at Stony Point. Look closely at the dates. Why do they all end before 1912? This is not evidence of promises broken, but of loved ones kept away, because the men, women, and children buried here were the only black residents of Forsyth County, Georgia, for nearly all of the 20th century.
all of the Negro people had to leave. There was knocking on the door, and they were told to get out.
Elon Osby heard the story directly from her own mother, Willie Mae Bagley, just a 2-year-old back in 1912 when the Night Riders came to their home and so many others in Forsyth County.
Can you imagine the fear that they would have felt?
William and Ida Bagley paid taxes on 60 acres they owned in 1912. We could find no record of any sale in the county courthouse except those of white men later selling parcels of the Bagleys' land to one another. The 1910 census showed the Bagleys among 1,098 black residents of the county, a tenth of the total population. By 1920, nearly every last one of them was gone.
There are these long stretches where decade after decade, the black population of Forsyth County is zero.
Historical photos show only white faces after 1912. So what happened that year? Thousands turned out to celebrate the public hanging of 2 black teenagers, convicted in a single day by an all-white jury of raping and murdering a white girl named Mae Crow. The other black suspect had already been lynched right here on the Cumming Courthouse Square.
The lynching of Rob Edwards involved a very large crowd gathering outside the jail, dragging him out of the jail, beating him with crowbars, dragging his body around town behind a wagon, and then eventually his corpse is hoisted to on a telegraph pole, and everyone in the crowd takes turns shooting into his body.
Time has not stopped at the cemetery where Mae Crow is buried next to a Confederate soldier. The headstones here continue through the 20th century, unlike the black graveyard at Stony Point.
White people felt we had no value, not in life and not in death.
White only, no black!
Civil rights leader Hosea Williams and other activists marched twice in Forsyth County in January of 1987. They were met with fierce resistance, which locals blamed on outside agitators.
The phrase racial cleansing is offensive to them. Shouldn't it be?
I don't know how they can say it's offensive to them. What do you think it was to us?
Back in 1912, whites also blamed outsiders as papers across the nation documented the campaign of terror that led to the expulsion of the entire black population. But we don't know how the local paper covered it because this is the only known surviving edition of the Forsyth County News from all of 1912. It features an article praising the public executions.
Most of the Forsyth County News has been microfilmed, digitized. You can access it online.
Mm-hmm.
But 1912, all but one issue, one edition, has been erased. It's vanished. What's the importance of making sure this history isn't erased?
So that it doesn't happen again.
Just across from the spot where Rob Edwards was lynched, Lady Justice faces history wearing her blindfold. But soil from the square has been collected in a jar, and the name Rob Edwards will soon join the lynching memorial at the Equal Justice Initiative.
The Community Remembrance Project of Forsyth County really got this rolling and worked with the Equal Justice Initiative. So they're going to put up a marker that will memorialize Rob Edwards and tell the story of that lynching. And that's going to be on the spot where he was lynched, which is something I never thought I would live to see.
This with the marker is a first step.
There are already several hidden markers to the black community that once thrived here, now surrounded by new neighborhoods that are increasingly diverse. Some of those new residents are buying homes here, on the land Elon's grandparents once owned. The old Bagley place is now among the most valuable real estate in Metro Atlanta.
Atlanta, Mecca or myth? The city of Atlanta, it's often referred to nationally as the Black Mecca, but is it true? Naima Abdullahi examines the Black experience in Atlanta as it relates to inequality, poverty, and the opportunity gap.
Atlanta is not Wakanda. It's not. I know you want to believe it. We've all heard it, but it's not. Let me just break it down for you. It is arguably the culture capital of the entire nation, the #1 destination for film, entertainment, music, hip-hop in the Southeast, known for Black history, Black excellence, known as the Black Mecca, with so many incredible come-up stories like Tyler Perry. Who wouldn't be inspired by that?
But while you fighting for a seat at the table, I'll be down in Atlanta building my own.
While it is the heartbeat of the culture, unfortunately, at the same time, it's ranked as the #1 destination for income inequality. There's the romanticized version of Atlanta, and then there's the real Atlanta. Both a reality, but both, when combined, tell the story of this city, the #1 city for the haves and the have-nots.
I would never call Atlanta Wakanda. We do have a special city here. Let me be clear on that. But we can't negate those that struggle the most in the city.
While the census says Black people are the majority of the population in Atlanta, the wealth gap between Black Atlantans and white Atlantans is dramatic. The median household income for a white family is about $83,000 compared to $28,000 for a Black family, according to the Atlanta Wealth Building Initiative.
If a person is born into poverty in Atlanta, there's just a 4% chance of escaping poverty in their lifetime.
To compare the economic racial divide, just 2% of white households in Atlanta live below the poverty line, compared to 29% of Black households. The average Black-owned business is valued at about $58,000, while the average value of a white business is more than $600,000. But the imbalance doesn't stop there. Atlanta's top 5% of earners are bringing home around $300,000 a year, while the bottom 20% all live below the poverty line, making less than $17,000 a year. So who's in that bottom 20%? You'll find most of them in the heart of Atlanta's South Side and West Side, where historic Black communities are trying to hold on to their neighborhoods as property value goes up and gentrification brings in new neighbors.
I was thinking that we will be here forever. It looks like it's getting close. You're being robbed without a gun.
In the West Side, 53% of the homes are vacant, and almost half the people living there live below the poverty line.
Atlanta's the worst city in the country when it comes to income inequality. It's the worst city in the country when it comes to economic mobility. Because the harsh reality is, in the city of Atlanta, there are no poor majority white neighborhoods. There are no failing Latino schools in the APS school system. There are no Asian ghettos in the city of Atlanta. Almost 100% of those deplorable statistics are Black people in a Black city.
Yes, Atlanta continues to hold on to its title as the Black Mecca. The first time that association surfaced was in 1971 in Ebony magazine.
The idea of, quote unquote, Black excellence doesn't trickle to all the Black folk. And the real culprit is American greed.
Atlanta, the city too busy to hate, a phrase that was coined during segregation, has highways that show the city's struggle. Historians say the highways intentionally went through Black neighborhoods that were going to get bulldozed, and also created a border between white and Black neighborhoods, for example, the North and South Atlanta.
The thing about it is that was done by design. The city, by and large, is segregated.
That segregation along socioeconomic lines is still visible to this day.
I'm a firm believer that the only difference between Bankhead and Buckhead is access, opportunity, and exposure.
We were here before Mercedes-Benz came along.
The two versions of Atlanta both tell the story of this city. One doesn't get told as often as the other.
Yes, let's go on record to say that as far as a Black city, we have the greatest potential to get it right.
We have wholeheartedly adopted the reputation of being the Black Mecca. So we know that there is an appetite to have that be a reality.
If Atlanta wants to continue living up to its title as the Black Mecca, well, then Black Atlanta needs to be part of the economic engine that helped establish this city as the premier destination for Black excellence.
When we come back, the talk. For most households, the talk is that often awkward conversation parents have when explaining to their children about the birds and the bees. But in Black families, it's far more serious. It's about getting home safely. We're talking life and death.
you see when you look at your son?
Oh man, a ball of energy.
A ball of energy?
Very intelligent, a light in a dark room, loves football.
Loves basketball, loves soccer, and loves tennis.
Yes, and just an amazing personality. The fear is that they won't come home. The fear is that they're going to get that call. The fear is that their child is going to be another hashtag. I do not want him to grow up with anger in his heart, to hate and disrespect authority when it comes to police or anyone for that matter.
Speak to Lance, if this were Lance in the camera, and you were having the talk with him, what would you say to Lance?
I shouldn't have to have this conversation with my son. I shouldn't have to tell my son that there are going to be white people that don't like you. Not because of your talent or not because of you. They're not gonna like you because of your skin. I shouldn't have to have that conversation with my son. My son should be able to live a free and happy life as a child. My son has a heart full of love, and I feel like having that conversation with him will put hate into his heart with people, and I don't want that for him. I don't. I shouldn't have to have this, deep conversation, but it's a must.
Moving out back, down by the river.
It's frustrating that nobody understands but us.
There is a song down by the river.
A conversation no parent should feel it necessary to have, but unfortunately, it's an indication of where we are in America today. So where do we go from here? What role can all of us play? It begins with a candid conversation.
This is what we couldn't see earlier today, these crosses. Trayvon Martin, Freddie Gray, Walter Scott, George Floyd.
I had also been arrested for allegedly spending a counterfeit $20 bill. My experience with the police is very, very different than Mr. Floyd's.
This work is absolutely necessary. It's hard, it's disorienting, it's confusing, but it is absolutely necessary for humanity's sake.
White privilege does not mean you didn't work for what you had.
No revolution has ever been won unless you're able to win the sympathy, if not the active involvement of the masses.
We have to stop asking people to choose sides and just understand that everybody deserves to have a right to dignity, safety, and self-determination.
I can and will make 100 mistakes. I know that. But But I also have a moral obligation to try and, as we all do, to try and fix something that's very wrong in our country.
We didn't create these systems of our own oppression. We did not decide that there was an assigned value of Black life in America that was just by virtue of our existence occupying a lower social status, a lower economic status, a lower political status, a lower education.
Systemically, when I'm trying to buy a house, or when I'm trying to, open a business or receive grants or whatever, I'm faced with systemic racism also. Well, unfortunately, we live with the effects of racism in all those different arenas.
Each of us has something to bring to the table, and it's going to take all of us coming together to really solve and alleviate the racism, the injustices, the disparities that are really existing currently in our country right now.
There's an assumption that white privilege has to do with wealth, money, being rich, not having problems, not having worked for what you have in this world. White privilege does not mean you didn't work for what you have. White privilege doesn't even mean that your life doesn't have challenges. All white privilege means is that one of those challenges has never been and never will be the color of your skin. That is white privilege.
I can't breathe!
Black Lives Matter!
We built this country basically for free.
I stand with Black Lives Matter so much. You guys are creating a hostile environment here.
Washington, D.C.
Bozeman, Montana.
Between Texas and Georgia.
I'm a student. I'm an archaeologist.
I'm a herpetologist.
My role in the movement is to define my voice.
Is to educate.
I create classes, programs, and learning opportunities to support people through their journey of anti-racism.
I come from a place where I'm very privileged. I'm a white woman, I'm straight.
I don't think there's much I, as an individual, need to do other than encourage conversation.
I'm not racist, so, what's the rule?
I saw this stuff in history books. I never thought I would have to be on the front line.
Please call the cops.
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life.
After what happened to Christian Cooper, we wanted to highlight Black birders. We went with calling it Black Birders Week. We wanted to see people who look like us enjoying the outdoors, and we wanted to show people like, hey, look, we occupy these spaces as well.
I had also been arrested for allegedly spending a counterfeit $20 bill. My experience with the police was very, very different than Mr. Floyd's. I thought, okay, well, I'll just write about my experience really briefly. It's had 2 million likes and 600,000 retweets. And as I understand it, that's a lot.
75 things that white people can do for racial justice. It actually started out as a list for myself. And then I said, well, if I have this list, I might as well share it.
It takes so much Black death and so much gruesome, horrendous dehumanization of Black life for the white collective to notice what we've been saying all this time.
To me, at least, race is simply just the color of someone's skin. Like, it has nothing to do with who they are as a person.
Systemic racism. I don't think we have systemic racism. Yes, there are racist people out there, but we do not in this country have a systemic racism problem. And then there's this notion that there's this white privilege, but there really isn't. I'm not abusing Black people. Why should I feel guilty about it?
This moment, it's not happening because of celebrities. It's not. It's happening because of the millions of protesters around the world who have said, enough's enough.
We really want people to know, to listen, and I'm sorry. We just want to feel safe when we go outside. We don't want to feel like, is this the last time I'm gonna be leaving my house?
In my lifetime, I've not seen a moment such as this.
And I'm so terrified that not enough will change.
To be a voice, not an echo, but a voice. That's my role in this movement. And yes, it is a movement.
We're so fragmented. This is ridiculous. We don't seem to have learned a darn thing. I mean, they burn the stuff down in your own neighborhood. That doesn't make good sense. That's all you need to do. The fellow who sits in the pew next to you at church, and all you say is hi and bye, you gotta get to know him. You just go one rung at a time. You keep climbing. You don't look back. You keep climbing. And I just hope I live to see it. You hear?
And this is a moment where people are feeling a lot of stuff right now and are fed up. As I stand in this moment and I look at my journey, I have to make an appeal to my brothers and sisters. Because I realize that the only way to get constructive change is through nonviolent means.
The model that John Lewis set, John Robert Lewis, is the model that I'm looking to help develop more and more. And I know all the training he got because I was trained with him. John Lewis and I ended up being roommates at the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville. We were both in school. You can't do everything at the same time. Pick a specific issue that you can unite around. So in Nashville, we brought all of the students from different colleges and universities into the training, but to only focus on the lunch counters. We learned how to stand together and even suffer together. We were attacked, beaten, but even when that happened, we knew that we had to continue. You have to overcome fear in order to be a leader. When you talk about leaders, you're talking about leadership. It means that they're all on the same ship and not going in different boats in different directions. You have to look into a person's eyes, but you have to see what they are looking at. You know what you're looking at, but you have to try to figure out how do they view you? What do they see when they want to hurt you or harm you? And then the most radical thing you can do is to imagine being that person. You didn't choose to be Black. I ended up working with Martin Luther King. He recruited me, and he was telling me to come down to Atlanta. He realized the work that I had done in the Selma movement, and he wanted me to be part of his organization.
John and Bernard Lafayette bought 2 tickets, climbed aboard a Greyhound, sat up front, and refused to move.
There are so many young people right now asking themselves, what do I want my role to be in history? How did you ask yourself, what is my role, and how did you answer that for yourself?
That is one of the questions I had to ask myself. I said to myself, when I get wrong, I'm going to do something about this problem. I wasn't fighting for my grandchildren. I was fighting for my grandparents. So I wanted it to come soon. We do not know how long we're going to live. So we have to decide as soon as possible what contribution we're going to make. I have committed my life to train leaders. No revolution has ever been won unless you're able to win the sympathy, if not the active involvement of the masses.
I'm an anti-racism educator. Really just acknowledging the ways in which you move throughout the world and how can you show up in a way that reduces harm. Talking to your children every single day about race, the comments that you hear at the dinner table that are racist, saying something about that. The responsibility of dismantling white supremacy is actually on the ones who benefit from white supremacy the most, and that's white people. This work is absolutely necessary. It's hard, it's disorienting, it's confusing, but it is absolutely necessary for humanity's sake.
When people ask me about, to share about my experience as a Black trans woman, it is often hard for me to know where to start.
I experience life as a Black gay man every day, and I know what that means to me. I know what it feels like to experience racism. I know what it feels like to experience homophobia.
It's intersectional, which means that we have multiple identities that come together and shape our sense of being. And at the same time, those identities are subjected to various forms of systemic oppression. So you have racism and classism.
We have to stop asking people to choose sides and just understand that everybody deserves to have a right to dignity, safety, and self-determination.
We code switch because it's a part of who we are. When I'm at work, I speak one way, but when I have friends over, I'm talking to family, we can just be ourselves. We code switch and we just talk about what's going on in our, not just our professional lives, but our personal lives as well. And when it comes to being a person who's a part of a historically marginalized group, it's even more important to connect to other people who look like you because they can affirm you. Microaggressions are micro insults or micro assaults that are directed at a person because of their marginalized status in society. And by marginalized, I mean it's someone who is a member of a minority group, whether it's based on race, ethnicity, culture, gender, or even sexual orientation.
We all need somebody to lean on.
I think it has struck a nerve in a place I know as a white pastor. It has struck a nerve among my colleagues, people, in a way that I've never seen before. And I think that there is a chance for a transformative moment personally and transformative moment for the nation.
By having these conversations and by exposing ourselves to lots of different people of lots of different colors, hopefully you can have examples of people that, just like you know a good cop, I hope that people can know a good Black person so that they can also know that we're not all bad or evil or criminal.
I've been a journalist for 12 years. I've covered lots of protests, but going into the George Floyd protests, I knew something was different. I knew in the past we failed the community when covering Black Lives Matter. We failed to explain the root of the issue, racism. But I never felt like I could say those things out loud, never thought my voice mattered in that way. See, I'm not only a journalist, I'm a Black woman. When going into the first protest in Atlanta, I wanted to focus on accountability for everyone, including me. I wanted to make sure I was separating riots from peaceful demonstrations, making sure I wasn't demonizing protesters or police. I wanted to make sure people saw the good, not just the bad. 5 days into protests, something happened. It was right after curfew. My cameraman and I ran into these crosses, 16 to be exact, all with the names of dead Black people. We missed it earlier because there were thousands of people out there. But after curfew, it was just the police, other journalists, and these crosses. So I went on air and read them off, one by one.
Botham Jean, Eric Gardner, and it goes all the way down Alton Sterling. And here, at the end right here, is Maud Arbery.
And then I felt something was wrong. So I wrapped up the segment, but one of my anchors asked me a question. So I jumped back on air, and a few seconds later...
They're not just carrying the memory of the George Floyd video, they're carrying the memory of all of these people. I'm sorry.
For the first time in my career, I cried on live TV. The first person to text me after that was my news director. It was 4 words. I'm crying with you. I let out a sigh of relief because I thought for sure I was being fired. My coworkers were texting me, telling me thank you. They've been feeling like this all week. My social media is lighting up with people saying thank you for being human. But even with all that reassurance, I kept wondering, why did you start crying in the first place? And then it hit me. I'd been spending all of my energy doing 2 things, covering the protests and pretending I wasn't Black. I was pretending like I didn't know on a personal level exactly why all those people were out there. I felt pain. I've been called it. Been told I need to straighten my hair in order to get jobs. Have brothers who served in the military but are still worried because even though they wore camo for their country, they feel like it's not enough because they can't take off the one thing that makes them a target, their Black skin. When I saw those crosses, I saw all those videos replaying in my head. I realized these communities, my community, had been yelling for years. We just weren't listening. If I'm telling a story about abortion, I'm gonna work to understand what pro-abortionists think and what anti-abortionists think so I can tell the whole story. So when covering protests and I'm hiding a part of myself and from myself, and I'm not working to explain why people are out there, then I'm not telling the whole story. I wanted to be a journalist to make sure everyone knew their voice was important. My role is to make sure stories are told accurately, to help everyone understand why.
This is the reason why they're coming out here every single day.
I don't have all the answers, but it's my job to find them.
If the world becoming a place of equity and of justice is important to you, then it has to reverberate through everything you do all the time.
Black folks for decades have told us that something's really, really wrong. There is deep mistreatment and abuse. And then us white folks have dismissed, mitigated, ignored.
For Black people, it is a part of our lifestyle in every single way imaginable. From the way we do our hair, to where we go to school, to where we live, to jobs. It is in every part of our life. And if you're going to be an ally with us, it has to become a part of yours as well.
I can and will make 100 mistakes. I know that. But I also have a moral obligation to try and, as we all do, to try and fix something that's very wrong in our country.
we're peacefully protesting is to bring attention to everything that's going on.
I tell my son to stay out of trouble, do the best he can. And if I'm not willing to come out here and stand with everybody for him, then my words to him mean nothing.
I believe in something better than this. This isn't what's supposed to be, and this isn't what's supposed to happen. They shouldn't be pointing their guns at us. We are their citizens. We are them.
My role in the revolution is to be in the trenches.
An agitator, a facilitator.
What are the calls to action and how can I help them?
I think we've all very quietly expected some kind of progress to happen in a vacuum.
Certainly feel like up until this point I haven't done a good enough job.